There are a lot of unique and complex characters in the game of Blood on the Clocktower, and the goal of this video series is to help you get a bit more comfortable with some of the things that can happen in a game and help you develop your skills as a storyteller so that you can handle anything your players throw at you. Alright, this time we've got another different strategy for setting a rack up, which is starting with a random pile of characters. So I'm going to grab everything. All minions, all outsiders, one demon, and all the townsfolk. And I'm just going to mix them up a little bit. And then pick out, I'm going to do a setup for 7 because all the setups that I've done so far have been for a higher play count. I think looking at 7 is going to be more interesting for something like this. So keeping in mind the play count as you are setting up a game each time is going to be something to pay attention to. So 7 is no outsiders, 8 is 1 outsider, 9 is 2 outsiders, 10 is no outsiders, 2 minions. This time we're doing 7, which has no outsiders, even though I have put some in here because it might end up being a Baron game. So our 7 players, shock, literally maintaining eye contact while I'm shuffling these, and Baron happened to be on top. That is an extra minion. We've got an empath here, Slayer here, the Saint, the Mayor, and then the last one is the Imp, and we get to put a Drunk in play. So this is what our 7-player game looks like. It is incredibly hostile. Okay, and also this is where the players are sitting, hypothetically. How do we make this setup balanced? Okay, well, first thing, we've got the Saint, we've got the Slayer, we've got the Raven Keeper, which is kind of rough, but the Empath is the only info character. And the Empath is sitting next to both evil players, and the Slayer can just instantly shoot either of them, which is pretty scary. I think making the, let's say, hypothetically, the empath is the drunk and you give the empath a 1. That is not conclusive enough for the Slayer to shoot at something right away. The empath getting 2, they could possibly think that they are the drunk. I guess getting a 1 would be more likely. If you are running in the circumstances where it does get a 2, they do think they're drunk. There isn't really another good target to make the drunk, except maybe the Slayer. Making the Mayor the drunk is a pretty bad choice. Making the Raven Keeper the drunk is a pretty bad choice. Making the Slayer the drunk just means that the game doesn't end early to the Slayer figuring out or having a hunch who the demon is. So, giving correct information, empath getting a 2. Empath getting a 2 and then dying to the demon right away ends the game. So if you're the demon in this situation, don't do that. Just be like, oh, you must be the drunk. Oh, I'll kill every other person. And then the remaining major obstacle is the Mayor. Because the play count is so small, the Raven Keeper is actually pretty likely to die here. And the Raven Keeper hitting the Imp, who is obviously always going to be still alive when this thing activates, is going to be actually very climactic, rather than the Slayer just shooting the Imp on the first day. It's not very climactic. Everyone's like, oh wow, and then you're like, all right, can we play a real game now? Which is a fun story, not fun gameplay. It's the same as there's multiple types of fun. There's fun right now while we're doing this, and then there's fun later where you're recounting the story because it was funny or something. Very oftentimes things that are very bad can be fun later in joking about it. This is not the kind of game that you're trying to make. You're trying to make a game that is fun now while I'm here playing it. I don't want to be telling a story about how I was frustrated for an hour and had a funny climax. That's not good gameplay. The goal is to make sure that the actual playing of the game is really fun. In this here, the Raven Keeper has a solid chance of activating and doing something relevant. The Empath has a puzzle to solve of, are they the drunk or are their neighbors actually evil? The Mayor is trying to get everyone on side. The Mayor goes to the person on one side and goes, hi, I'm the Mayor, please trust me. And that person goes, I am the Imp. And goes to the person on the other side and goes, hey, I'm the Mayor, please trust me. And that person goes, I am the Saint. And the Mayor has not got any easy allies next to them to really be able to convince them Because the Saint's going to be like, look, I don't care about not executing you. I care about not executing me. And then a Slayer who's going to try and shoot someone. And based on who they shoot, if they do actually shoot the demon, and because they're drunk, it doesn't hit, the demon does look kind of good and helps make the empath think that they are drunk. I guess depending on what the Baron claims here, because there's not that many info characters, there's no starting info characters, there's only one each night info character, the Baron here could claim any of those things and the Baron could actually run the whole game, which is not great. This is probably not a balanced rack up. I think unless if the empath is like, yes, kill my neighbors, I don't care, you're both evil, kill my neighbors, and they're the executions, I don't really see a good victory happening naturally here. And if the Baron is a new player and they don't really do anything, I think that's really the only chance that the good team would have. But if the Baron is an advanced player and they realize that they could just run the whole game, the evil team will win. And especially if the imp gets some lucky kills. So I think that is an interesting one to consider. This is not necessarily a good racker. This is definitely imbalanced. I personally don't have any confidence that people would walk away from this going, oh, that was really fun, cool, it'd be great. Because it is very coin flippy. There's no starting info characters. There's barely good each night info. Because let's hypothetically have a look at this, right? A lot of this game hinges on what the empath thinks. Now, what if we changed it to the fortune teller? The empath is now the fortune teller, and to keep it as parallel as possible, the fortune teller picked the Baron and the imp on the first night and got a yes, and claimed empath, which I've seen, it happens quite a lot. It is an easy way to, if you believe, especially if you're an empath, I got a 0, but if you believe that the evil team's on the other side, you can pretend to be the fortune teller, pretend to be empath information, to trust the people next to you. But in this case, fortune teller's gotten a yes, which is like a 1 in the equivalent of empath, right? So they would not come out so confidently, I got a 2, we have to kill my neighbors. They would go, oh, I think one of my neighbors is evil, I got a 1. And they're much less likely to persecute on that person. But the fortune teller gets to check the other people in the room and maybe hit a red herring. So I think just changing this one thing, assuming the fortune teller doesn't die really early on, is a much more interesting and dynamic game. But you have to consider, we've created 2 power players for the early game and 2 power players for the late game. The power players for the early game are the Baron and the fortune teller. The information that they give the circle will run the game. At the end of the game, regardless of all of the information, what that happened in those first maybe 2 or 3 days to build trust between people, our late game power players are the imp and the mayor, who will face off regardless of what happens. The difference between the empath rack up and this one is that the fortune teller can actually be vouching for the mayor, and depending on what the Raven Keeper does when they die. But this is already slightly more balanced, slightly less scary to run as a game. But if you keep in mind, I said actually in an earlier episode with the empath, so let's put him back in here, and we'll grab out the chef. Because of the size of the game, right, 7 players, the empath immediately checks 2 of them and knows their own identity, like pretty confidently, regardless of whether they are drunk or not. They'll go, I have this feeling about 3 players. 3 out of 7 players is a very big percentage. Whereas if you're playing a 10-player game, 3 out of 10 players is much less of a big percentage. Whereas the fortune teller has much less confidence in everything that they're seeing when they're checking people throughout each night. So the fortune teller works better in a small game, empath works better in a big game, but how I wanted to prove that is here, we are going to replace the mayor with the chef. We have an empath that's got a 2, reliably. We have a chef that goes, I know the evil team are not sitting next to each other. So, of the scanned players with these 2 abilities, there's 3 people that are not checked. The empath has seen 2 evil people and gets a 2. The chef says that matches up. Now let's move their positions, right? If we put the drunk slayer on the other side of the board, the empath checks 2 people and goes, these people are both good. The chef says there is no pairs of evil players, and the chef looks to the left down the circle and goes, I know I'm the chef. There's a player confirmed by the empath, a player confirmed by the empath. The evil team can't be sitting next to each other, and there's only 3 players remaining. That means that the person in the middle has to be good, because there's no combination of a good player sitting that doesn't otherwise rely on a pair. So that's the demon, that's the baron. And in most setups of a 7-player game where you have the chef and the empath, both of them getting reliable information, you will know where the evil team is sitting. So when it comes to play count and when it comes to what characters you're picking, you have to consider just how powerful they are differently. If you always operate as if the empath and the fortune teller is the same character, but you use the empath in big games and you use the fortune teller in small games, you will have a bit of an easier time with balance. And there's a few other characters that do the same thing. For example, the monk and the soldier have pretty much overlap a lot with their abilities. And some of the other information characters out there can be doing similar things like that, where if you look at just how much of the circle they are able to verify over a period of time, you can then use that to get, is this going to be too powerful in this player setup? Does that maybe mean that that person needs to be the drunk, or where am I going to put the outsiders to compensate for this? But that's it from this rack up. Hopefully that was something interesting and got you thinking about how you set up games in Trouble Brewing. This has been another storyteller utility video from Cutlass of Board Games. If you did like this, please let us know in the comments, or post some rack ups for us to have a look at, or any questions that you have so we can go over it and make sure that you're going to be the best storyteller you can be.